With all of the hype around Frutiger Aero, I thought it would be fun to try and recreate it ourselves. I've noticed a lot of people who seem to refer it to some of the dominant aesthetics today, especially in regards to user interfaces. So, in today's video, we'll be attempting to reimagine some current day app icons with more futuristic and abstract designs. We'll even be modelling an entire Frutiger Aero style desktop background with some 3D software from the 2000s. Make sure to stick around to see the complete package. For those of you who might not know, Frutiger Aero refers to the design aesthetic that was popular in the mid to late 2000s. It's associated with glossy, HD imagery and typically features more natural elements and bright colours when compared to the minimalist tech aesthetics of today. One of the main reasons companies used to use these sorts of styles was to make the tech appear more user-friendly, by relating it to concepts in nature that people already understood. For this video, I'll be taking inspiration from images like these, meaning that I'll try to incorporate elements of nature and saturated blues and greens in each of the designs. First up, I wanted to have a go at the Maps icon for Apple. This has always been quite a simplistic design, showing a close-up of a street on a sort of 3D map. It used to feature a red pin marking a location in the bottom left, before introducing the blue line in iOS 6 to reflect the navigation system. Currently, it matches all of Apple's other app designs, being quite flat with a fairly limited colour palette. In making the new design, I was inspired by Frutiger Aero's focus on these huge globes. In almost all of the images people currently associate with it, you'll be able to find one somewhere, perhaps looking dangerously drinkable or already cracked open and leaking. So I started with this image of the world that I placed in the middle of an app-sized rectangle for scale. To signify the act of moving around or being directed, I added in this arrow wrapped around the back of the globe. Smoothing it out, I made sure to flip the side of the arrow that the sunlight would be hitting to the top, and then use the erase tool to get rid of the jagged pixels on the bottom half. I was pretty happy with it at this point, but soon realised it looked more like an Internet Explorer than Maps. Returning to the original iOS design, I took the red pin that's pretty much synonymous with navigation and added in one of my own. Making sure to include a shadow big enough to eclipse the country of Kazakhstan, I was pretty much done. So here's the before and here's the after. Next on the list was Garageband, which has always featured a guitar as a central element. The current icon is no exception, with the addition of speakers behind it in a simple but intuitive design. To contrast this, I wanted to lean into the more abstract and busy representations of the aesthetic you see today, while still maintaining a degree of functionality. To start off with, I took this image of my guitar, as it's quite similar to the one used by Apple. I then grabbed this grassy backdrop and cut out the guitar to the best of my abilities, setting it up as if it was resting against the side. Still, it felt like it was missing something. I did some researching and really liked the glossy blue music notes on early icons like this, thinking that they could make a good centerpiece. So I cut one out and duplicated it, to give the impression that they were coming from the guitar. Smoothing a couple things out, I then added a couple spots of glare, contributing to its fresh and naturalistic feel. After this, I was pretty content with the product. Again, here is the before and here is the after. My next victim was Discord. I've actually seen a couple Frutiger Aero style renditions of the icon, and really liked the ones that used elements of water and aquatic theming. In line with this, I started by grabbing a Discord logo I'd previously cut out on PowerPoint, and stuck over a blue gradient. Somehow entirely avoiding bubbles until this point, I thought the time was ripe and chucked the icon inside a translucent sphere. It was already looking pretty clean, but was clearly lacking a background. For a while I messed around with some of the inbuilt gradients in Photoshop, but couldn't find anything that really fit the vibe. After a while, I settled on using this image of the ocean, which I overlaid on a darker blue before reducing the opacity to make the icon more distinguishable. Nice. On my Mac, this icon is now home to our Discord server, which you can join through the link in the description. Soon, we'll be hosting things like art competitions, so feel free to drop by to chat about aesthetics, the gym, and everything in between. Anyway, here's the before and the after. Behind the scenes, I also made new versions of system preferences, with these giant cogs, iMovie with this butterfly, photos which looks like something you'd see on a digital camera advertisement, and more. But it was one thing to have a few new app icons. What I really needed was a new background. However, we weren't going to use anything like modern day Photoshop, and we definitely weren't going to go outside to try take photos like this. No, we needed something authentic, something from around the 2000s. Something with an appropriately ridiculous UI. Bryce 3D was first released in 1997 and offered an accessible method of generating ray-traced landscapes and objects. You may recognise this visual style from Trapper Keepers, with the chrome blobs and sharp architecture. Of course, this software does lend itself more to Y2K aesthetics like Cybercore, especially considering its notable ability to generate and render giant spheres and other 3D artifacts. Still, considering the version I'm using today was released around Frutiger's peak, I thought it would be a fun challenge to try and make some designs with the software regardless. When you first load into Bryce, you'll pick up on its very unique UI, which is composed of icons that look like they were made within the software itself. This makes navigation quite interesting, a novelty that quickly wears off when you realise you have no idea what anything even does. However, it's still surprisingly powerful for something that's well into its 20s. You have full control of terrain generation, cloud formation, and the rendering process is fairly quick for less complex builds. If you're looking to experiment with some different textures and lighting on objects, it's definitely accessible for beginners. Somewhat. Anyway, the first thing that pops into my mind when thinking about Frutiger Aero is always the Windows XP wallpaper. It's often the backdrop of media compilations of the aesthetic and appears quite a lot in my videos, so replicating it seemed like the best place to start. Of course, the first step was building those iconic green hills. I spent about half an hour figuring out where the render camera even was before modelling some of the terrain into a rough shape. Once I was happy with it and its texture, I moved on to the skybox, which is one of Bryce 7's coolest features. Here, I decreased the cloud density and made sure some of the light from the sun was peeking out from behind the hill. It was at this point that I did my first render. About 5 minutes later I was met with this, which felt like a pretty faithful digital rendition of the photo. However, it still looked pretty flat. Naturally, it needed some bubbles. And this is where Bryce really shines. There is nothing it or I like more than giant balls, and Bryce is pretty damn good at playing around with them. Its ability to generate highly reflective and customizable chrome blobs is impressive, and so while there are a lot of cool textures on offer, I went with the glass. 25 minutes after hitting render, it put out something that I was really happy with. The bubbles looked surprisingly realistic, especially the ones that were clustered together. To make the image pop out a bit more, I adjusted the saturation and contrast, finally ending up with this. Now, while it doesn't have that same HD look, I still think it's pretty cool that we were able to capture some of the original elements and feel on the software in a relatively short period of time. I'd love to experiment a bit more with Bryce in the future, and explore some more Y2K or demo scene-esque aesthetics, but that's all we've got time for today. Thanks so much for watching. Feel free to leave a like if you enjoyed the video, or a dislike if otherwise, and consider joining the Discord or subscribing if you'd like to see more content just like this. Again, the recent support has been insane. As always, this has been Extramint, and I'll see you in the next one.
I told my daughter, don't feed the dog coffee, but she does the exact opposite. She feeds the dog coffee, and now I have a dead dog.